This is The Great Outdoors with Jason White, exploring the great outdoors in Pennsylvania and beyond. Brought to you by the Mariana Outdoorsman Association and by Wild Acres Farm, Fishery, and Regulated Hunting Grounds. Now, The Great Outdoors with Jason White.
Hello, friends. I'm Jason White. Excuse me. Welcome to The Great Outdoors. Special thanks to our sponsors, the Mariana Outdoorsman Association. You can join the MOA today at marianaoutdoors.com. Again, that is marianaoutdoors.com. Stock a lot of big, gnarly, huge trout. So if you're an avid trout fisherman, it is on fire right now. And also, if you enjoy upland bird hunting, you don't want to miss out. We stock birds weekly. And last but not least, we have a bunch of gun ranges that are truly one of a kind, with the longest rifle range in southwestern Pennsylvania at 750 yards. So special thanks again to the Mariana Outdoorsman Association. Also, Wild Acres Farm, Fishery, and Regulated Hunting Grounds. If you're looking to book an upland bird hunt, whitetail deer hunt, or a free-ranging turkey hunt, all are free-ranging, by the way, you can call 724-579-0924. Again, upland birds, deer, turkey, and also we'll throw trout fishing into the mix too if you're looking to do a blast and cast package. 724-579-0924, or you can go to 10mileco.org. That stands for 10 Mile Creek Outfitters.org. 10 Mile, TENMILE, CO.org. Check us out today. And last but not least, visit Washington County, Pennsylvania, the Washington County Tourism and Promotion Agency. Visit Washington County, PA. Special thanks to them for their unwavering support. We're going to be following up on our conversation from last week. My guest today is, again, Pat Lasco, board member of the Mariana Outdoorsman Association. Are you there, Pat? Can you hear me, Pat? Not sure. Well, whenever he calls in, I will get it moving. But anyways, following up on last week, we were talking about the need for trapping, the different predator issues in Pennsylvania, and actually, I was doing some research, and it just dropped in front of me in the Game News magazine for Pennsylvania. Are you there, Pat?
Yeah, I'm back.
All right, awesome. Happy to have you. We were, Pat and I went into detail last week about a bunch of stuff from butchers, red tags, trapping, ground predators, aerial predators, just a lot of diverse topics, but certainly something that we are wanting to dive into. We had something presented to us out of the Game News of Pennsylvania that broke down the Pennsylvania Game Commission's budget from last year, and Pat and I had talked about this in advance, and it was kind of a little bit mind-boggling. The revenue from fiscal calendar year total generated revenues, which would have been the end of June 30th, 2023, the revenues were $448 million, approximately, and the total expenses were approximately $201 million. That is approximately a $247 million profit margin. I was a little bit caught off guard when I saw that, Pat. What do you think?
Yeah, I was a little shocked. I mean, first thing I responded back was that is that the PGC, and I was in absolute shock of the way the game lands look and the things that we have, and like we discussed, the program for the bounties on the raccoons and all those nest predators and stuff like that. I mean, there should be a budget allotted for that.
Well, you're talking of almost a $500 million revenue and only spending approximately $2 million. It's kind of it's definitely quite the shell shock for me, because what Pat just referenced, we've been talking about issues regarding crop damage prevention, bounties. So when we talk about bounties, actually South Dakota has a program where they pay $10 per pelt, and that's actually, I guess the best way to describe it would be similar to a red tag program for deer, but the difference is during that allotted time, you turn in the pelts and you get paid $10 per pelt. So there's a financial incentive, and Pat can attest. Pat, go through, tell people just the amount of, from time to trap costs to bait that you have to use in the traps to fuel. Like, give people a general perspective on just say what we've done, in the past how many weeks, just that general process, the timing, the costs, so people get a better understanding of what goes into trapping and why it's very, very important that we do it, and why the state needs to reevaluate where we are today.
Let's just start with the basics. First, the reason I got into trapping was trapping is a late season type sport. So hunting season ends, January sometime. So it gives you about 2 months to, do something in the late winter. That's kind of why I got into it. But, the diehard trappers, they start when season opens in the state of Pennsylvania. It's October something, 21st, I believe. So they have a lot of running. Even at that point, most of your pelts are, they call them blue. They aren't fully developed to prime fur. They'll have a little bluish to them. They aren't as thick and heavy. Most of the time they don't take them. They just kind of get the first few things out of the way. Then you got to buy your traps. Your basic raccoon trap, most people have gone to dog proofs. They're quick, easy. You basically squeeze them down, set the trigger, throw a little bait into the bottom of it and around it, put some scent so they know where to find it. Those traps run about $15 a piece right now. Then you have to have an anchor system, so you either have to buy some cable and make your own, or that's going to cost you time and money, or you just buy them already pre-made from the factory. I'm not even sure what they cost per dozen anymore. I just bought some cable and the barrels and stuff like that, and I made my own. Sometimes you have to stake them into the ground, so then you have to have a different kind of stake system for it. So there's, good lord, a full 1,000-foot of 330 seconds aircraft cable, you're talking $50 to $80 probably. You get a lot of stuff out of that, but then you're making your own and time and everything. So once you get past what trap you're going to have for that, but traps, you want to trap beaver, you're going to talk $30 a trap for a beaver. So then you have anchors and all that stuff. Plus you have to have a tag on them. It has to be a non-destructible tag. You order them, you can put your CID number, your name and address on them. Then those have to be attached to the trap. So everything has to be prepped and ready to go before you even start the season. Once you get into season, from the time you set your traps till the time you pull your traps, you have to check every 36 hours. So that means you have to be at that trap by 36-hour mark. Most guys check, before or after work, depending. Then you got to cost your time and gas to where you're at. So depending on how much of a line you're running, you have your truck, you have your gas, you have your traps, you have your bait. You're already a couple $100 in, plus you have your licenses. So once you get setting, it takes probably about an hour and a half, depending on what you catch for the day, reset and anything, dispatching of animals. So you're talking, just to get set up and running, a couple $100, and then at least an hour to an hour and a half of your day, just right there. And if you don't catch anything, or you only catch a few raccoons, which are only worth a couple dollars now, you're going deeper into the hole. And a lot of guys got out of fur taking due to the price and the cost of everything, and or the pelts weren't worth what they were getting out of it. So now we have a huge increase of predation. I was just watching North American Trapper the other day on TV, who is Alan Prost out of Northeast PA. And one of the things they brought across the screen is there's 3 to 5 million coyotes in the 49 states, and they only harvest about 500,000 a year, if I'm remembering right.
Well, it's a costly thing, and that's not counting your license. That's not counting, there's additional stamps that the Game Commission charges for, which are additional fees. don't quote me, I don't know the exact number, but it's well over $100 for a resident of Pennsylvania to get all the tags for the game commission.
That's just your basic hunting license is $100.
Yep.
Then you want to hunt migratory birds, you have to spend another $6-7. I think residents is like $3. Even the doe tags are $6-some for residents, and they're $20-some for non-resident. If you want to get deer taken out and you bring these non-residents in, why are they getting dinged so hard for that when you want them eliminated? When you want to get your doe population in control.
Well, I definitely.
Then you got the bobcat tags, and
I definitely feel that the predators are out of control in the state. I know, if you really calculate the math on what we've done just at one farm, one piece of ground, and you extrapolate that out to all the other properties, not only around us, but beyond that are not being trapped, it's kind of wild.
Yeah.
I mean, it's clearly... They wonder why we don't have pheasants anymore. Well, for those that do not know, pheasants and even grouse, turkeys, and I've heard, I don't know how many people complain in different conversations. Pheasants are gone. Grouse, you don't see grouse anymore. Rabbit numbers are down from what they used to be. And also I've even, read reports from the Game Commission about turkey populations being reduced. A big thing that people have to understand is all of those species that we just said, those are all ground nesting animals. So, like, they have their young on the ground, etc. Raccoons, possums, skunks, they're what they call nest raiders. They'll go in and destroy the eggs, eat the eggs, and potentially even the young when they're just hatching. That's a huge problem. It's a huge problem because if they can't produce without being eaten, obviously, it creates a huge issue. Then you expand on that idea. Now you're looking at, okay, well, maybe they survive and get to be a little bit bigger size or even adulthood. Well, if fox and coyotes are extremely prevalent, I hate to burst anybody's bubble, but, I know coyotes, some people think, it's good that they take care of the deer. I mean, Pat, you and I have talked about this a lot. I mean, coyotes can get a fawn, maybe in that first 30 to 60 days. But after that, you're talking a very difficult proposition for a coyote to go and grab an adult deer or even a 50, 60 pound animal that can move or put some distance in with itself. So, and then on top of that, talking about aerial predators, raptors, the different species of hawks. I'm sure all of you go down the highways and you just see the hawks circling overhead. It's just gotten to the point it's out of control, and the ecosystem is basically out of balance. And these are all points, whether it's the financial reasons, high gas prices. We're definitely at a point where, we need to talk about it. But not only do we need to talk about it, to see the Game Commission profit margins being so astronomically high, it raises in my mind like a mountain of questions because, to Pat's point, South Dakota has a predator program. Why are we not exploring this idea? I mean, if we have a 200 and roughly $47 million profit margin, holy smokes! I mean, you could allocate $1 million just for bounties in this state, and it would not be a drop in the bucket. Same thing goes for crop damages. Do we need to explore the idea of potentially like offsetting mechanisms to either deter predators or to fencing initiatives? I mean, there's just a lot that needs discussed. And I would also throw into it, Pat, you and I have talked a lot about just kids being taught. Like, I mean, you run an organization. It's not like the game commission's reaching out saying, "Hey, we'd like to have classes at the club," or "Hey, we'd like to do more of this or more of that." Like, you don't survive. These clubs do not survive off of spaghetti dinners and cookie sales. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, I fully agree.
But it raises a lot of questions about this profit margin, because if there's this steep of, or this profitable of a venture, I mean, kind of it screams about not only the issues we've talked about, but you mentioned about the game lands. Kind of elaborate in your opinion or view of how the game lands are managed today and what you feel, even compared to what we do at the farm. Like, what could be an opportunity for the Game Commission to rectify that?
Most of the time now, they lease the game lands out to farmers, and then the farmer harvests it. He has to leave, to my knowledge, 10% of the crop on the field for the animals and whatnot. But 3-4 rows per strip of cornfield down there doesn't go far. It's surrounded by acres and acres of farmers that are trying to make a living on their crops. They keep just decreasing the amount of land that these guys have. And then they just don't. They've done some dove fields, from what I heard. I haven't been down there the last few years, but I have a lot of people I hunt down there that I know. And the dove fields were decent, but mostly they were shooting flybys. They were hitting between the farms and stuff like that, and maybe passing through where they could get a good shot. Essentially, they need to just plant stuff and just leave it. The bird fields are, briars and thick grasses, and if you don't have a dog in it, your bird goes down in there, it's hard to find. Even with a dog, it's hard to find sometimes. So getting them groomed a little bit better, I would say, would be a great thing. Just going in and, round up in what they're going to plant, and then putting in a good seed that is Roundup ready, so that they can plant it and then spray it again if they have to. There's just so much, and you were talking, aerial predation, stuff like that. Even in the nest raiders, the crows are even bad. And we were talking about them the other day, and I brought up the fact that they're Thursday, Friday, Saturday only. People don't hunt crows anymore, but they will go right into a nest. I put a couple eggs in front of a game camera one time. Within 45 minutes, that crow was there picking off eggs, and they all disappeared. So that's just another thing that we need to do on the game lands and anywhere around the state. But back to the game lands, I think we just developed them a little bit and left more crop there, more food. I think the deer would stay on the game lands versus just coming and bedding and then going out to the farmer's fields and eating his crops.
Well, certainly a lot of the game lands are not. I don't want to speak for all of them, but I can tell you the ones here in southwestern Pennsylvania are in many ways lackluster at best. I know there's a game lands out near Scenery Hill, and it's like fields and fields of jagger bushes. Don't get me wrong, that is a good, I would call that like an edging habitat, like places like that, like having like
you have to have thick places.
Having like a 50-yard strip along a wood edge for thick cover, yeah, I agree with that. But to have just fields and fields of jaggers and basically brush that they only just brush hog, I guess, every other year or whatever it is that they do, I can't say that I agree with that. I think that there needs to be a total overhaul and a reevaluation of habitat management. Because then it gets into, then they get into these debates like you were saying about dove fields. How it's okay to hunt over sunflowers for dove, but you can't hunt over cornfields or for deer. Like, these are the analogies that are like common sense to like look at it and understand it. But like for you and I, we're sitting here like, how in the world are they coming up with their views on this? And that all ties back into baiting, and how the Game Commission interprets it. A food plot to the Game Commission is not baiting. How that is the case, I don't rationally understand. You're altering the landscape to make the animals do something that you want them to do. I don't know, Pat. Their whole stance on these food plots and the way they manage things, I just can't say that I agree with.
I agree on that. When you can do it on their land, but you can't do it on a private land, as far as like the standing crops and stuff like that, that creates a huge issue.
Well, it's no different than, I know we've talked about this in the past, but like I'm allowed to plant an apple tree and hunt in the area of the apple tree, but I'm not allowed to buy a bag of apples from the store. That's not allowed. I think there's just a lot of misconceptions. I think that there's misunderstandings of how to enhance habitat. But I think with all of these things, it comes down to management. And if you're not going to, for the listeners out there, I mean, Pat and I are diligent with land management, whether that's soil samples, whether that's field plantings, whether that's manure, whether that's orchard plantings and tree plantings, trapping, understanding the circle of life and how you have to manage it accordingly. The Game Commission is just clearly not seeing, I don't know, maybe they're not seeing what we're seeing. And if that's the case, I don't understand how. I mean, that's why they're there. That's the jobs that they're there to do. But to acknowledge and hear the things that we're saying, and then to see these profit margins, I don't know, buddy. I think it's, to me, I would describe the current operation as we're comfortable. They are comfortable. And I just can't, I don't know. Some changes need to be had in regards to the things we're talking about. And I think it needs to be done sooner than later because, you're seeing less people really getting engaged in the outdoors. And I think that's a sad path for us moving forward, as a state and even a country.
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, a lot of states down south, there's several states that have it wrote in right to their constitution that hunting and trapping, doesn't go away. It's wrote into their law.
Well, definitely, we are diligently, and I mean diligently, working on conservation, land management, addressing all these things. But I feel sorry for everybody out there that's dealing with crop damages, the people that tell the stories about, the rabbits that we used to have, the pheasants that used to be around. I mean, everybody has to understand something. They didn't just magically poof and disappear. There's causes and effects to everything in life. And trapping many years ago, pelt prices were much higher. And there's been advocacy against trapping, advocacy against fur coats, and those types of things. I would never in a million years ever condone, doing anything to wipe out a species or to, do things that are disingenuine of the outdoors. But when you allow the scales to tip so far to one side as opposed to the other, and now we're at a point where predators are astronomically out of control, it just screams. I mean, it's how we got where we are, Pat.
Yeah.
What I wanted to talk to you a little bit about these fish stocking permits. So I got a call this morning out of Harrisburg from the Fish Commission, and you want to talk about a chaotic and the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. So I got a call about these fish stocking permits, or fish stocking notices as they call them, and spoke to this lady on the phone. She's real nice, and she's like, well, she's asking specifics about the sizes, and I was like, well, do you understand, we don't know the exact number of fish and the exact size of the fish until the day the fish are delivered. Like, that's when we know. And she's like, well, can't you give an estimate? And I was like, well, we already gave you an estimate. Like, we buy them in ranges, and we allot so much money for each range of fish, like 12 to 15 inches. Let's say it's $1,500. Like, that's what we're allocating. And I said, we don't buy them by the inch. We buy them out of that category, but we pay the pound. That's how we do it. And it was like, you would have thought I was speaking a different language. And I was like, well, the problem here that I'm seeing is people are creating rules and regulations that are not having to deal with their own rules and regulations. Basically, making up stuff and trying to force people to do things that they themselves do not understand how to deal with it. And I think that is a testament of what government is. Let's create something that's going to make everybody's lives terrible, and we're going to then sell it as this fluffy rainbows and butterflies proposition that it's all good. It's really bad, actually. These fish stocking notices are terrible. I then proceeded to convey about how we have received calls from other clubs that are being threatened by fish wardens or fish, what do they call them, waterways conservation officers here in southwestern Pennsylvania, and that is troubling. And I know, Pat, there's certainly. Why don't you tell a little bit? We don't have to go into names or anything, but like just a general perception of some of these officers, wardens, and just the bad people skills that we've seen personally, and also the stories we've heard, because they should be teaching people as opposed to threatening people.
Yeah, I mean, bedside manner is usually not the greatest. I've watched some of the videos that, either the PGC or the fishing boat, whatever, has been putting out for the recruits, and they're all happy-go-lucky, but, we're straight up told they're there to do their job, and that's all they really want to do, or, care about, and, get to the bottom of the story. And they don't care how they do it. They're usually, I've run into other ones out, other places, and never had that kind of issue. I hunted a lot up north in Pymatuning years ago, and I talked to all those officers almost every time I was there, told them where I was hunting, all that, and they never got bothered. Down here, I'm half scared to go out, and most of the guys that I know, they go out, and half the time they're worried about getting a fine. Even if you're doing everything by the book or trying to do it by the book, they have certain regulations for certain lakes, like crappie can only be 8 inches at this lake and 9 inches at that lake. There's no across the board anymore of the size limits on some of these lakes. So if you go to one lake and you don't see the sign or you don't read your book fully, you can get pinched on that. Even if you have them in the live well and they're still alive, usually they still fine you for it, even though the fish could go back. I understand if the fish is already dead, then yeah, there's nothing you can do. Is there ways to just give a warning about it? Yeah. If they're doing it on purpose and they're repetitive, then yes, I fully understand that going on. But the bedside manner and the work relationship between the people that they're, working for, representing, all that. There should be a good relationship between the wardens and the people that they're, serving.
I certainly wholeheartedly agree with you, and I think that's a big deal to what do I want to say? I think the relationship is bad with the wardens and the communications with the clubs. And I say that because, you should see more wardens. If they have this type of a profit margin, there needs to be more commitment to relationships with clubs, classes, collaborations, etc. And to your point, they don't want to do that. That's extra work, or they view it as an inconvenience. And I'm sorry, but we should be building and fostering relationships with these clubs, because guess what? That's the next generation of kids that are going to be trappers. That's the next generation of small game hunters. That's the next generation of deer hunters. And I just
was talking to.
No, go ahead.
Sorry, I was talking to a guy the other day, and he said he had a youth out with him. They didn't have a gun. They all had 12 gauges, and he got fined for the kid not having a mentored license. So nowadays, if you take a kid out, you have to get them a mentored license, even if they aren't. So you're paying the state for this youth going out and just being out there with, an adult, their family, somebody, aunt, uncle, whoever they're with, mother, father, and you have to get them this license. But if you don't get it for them and they think that they, might be hunting or taking game, they get the fine for it. So now this kid's first year experience is out. Just because they didn't have a license, now it's going to cost, whoever they're with money. To me, that just doesn't sit right.
Well, we had that one scenario that one time when the warden came around with the Boy Scouts and basically in many ways just kind of scared these kids, and unnecessarily, was in no way, shape, or form something that needed to be done. And those, to your point, those are the experience that kids remember. And what they fail to understand is instead of being a mentor, they're basically then viewed as the enemy, or as a bad person, or somebody out to get them, or a bully. And that's not what it should be. And sadly, that's a lot of what's been fostered. And look, if they're mad because of their pay or because of their hours or whatever, I can understand being disgruntled for having whatever issues you may have. But at the end of the day, we live in a world where the United States is about capitalism, and Pennsylvania is clearly about capitalism, and that's their choice. If they're unhappy, they need to get another job. And if that many are unhappy within the agency, well, then the Game Commission clearly needs to reevaluate how they're paying people, or their hours, or their shifts, or whatever you want to say. But it's definitely been a systemic thing, and I I'm 37, been involved with as far as clubs since I was a teenager, and I just do not see, to this day, in all that time, just do not see an openness for relationships between the Game Commission and Fish Commission with clubs. And I think that's a sad thing. I thought by now that things would have changed for the better. But hey, that's why we're talking about it, because we need to use this opportunity and our megaphone as an awareness tool that, clubs want to work with the Game Commission, clubs want to work with the Fish Commission, but that has to be a reciprocated act. It just can't be a one-sided affair. I also wanted to follow up, Pat, about what we had talked about in regards to the butcher shops. I just found that whole proposition about, how do I want to say this? You all basically, them renting space from you and giving hats and calendars, and I think that now seeing this surplus of funds, there's zero reason in the world as to why they're unable to afford to pay people for their services and for their business space. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I actually brought that up the other day, and they actually only want they don't want archery gear. So what they were telling you about, getting all of them, they don't want archery gear. They're coming by the time they get to them. If we don't have them in a cooler or a freezer or something like that, they're rotted out and stink, and they don't want to deal with that. So as far as that goes, they don't actually want the archery deer data. It's mainly just keep the rifle season data that way. But yeah, I mean, after a budget like that, they could definitely do something to, allocate a little bit of money to the processors for their space, even if it is just a barrel sitting outside. But you know what? If it's a little warm during rifle season, it does get to stinking sometimes.
Well, I just to see the amount of money that they're profiting, and we're talking about butcher shops getting paid with hats and calendars. I just think that's terrible, personally. Like you're not going to go to Walmart and buy groceries with and trade them a hat and a calendar. You know what I mean? Like it's a basic business 101. You guys got to make money, and and it's systemic even to where even with red tags in the summer. Well, if it's not profitable for you as a business to turn your coolers on and for you to process even in the summer, it's basic business. Like you're not going to live off of their bartered donations or whatever you want to call it. At the end of the day, the almighty dollar is what pays for groceries to be on your dinner table, and it's what pays your bills. So I really, really, really think there needs to be a total overhaul and a reevaluation of how they view butchers, because to me, not only are you an asset to the outdoor community, but you're also an asset to the community as a whole, because you're the ones doing the work for the the city missions that are getting the hunters sharing the harvest. Employing, I'm sure that there's a lot of kids and teenagers, people that even work part-time learning how to butcher. I just, the asset that the butchers are and how they're being undervalued, I think is something that I'm hopeful that by us talking about it, it's going to start becoming more of an attention getter for people. But, right now, we definitely, if there's this much money sitting in an account that's not being spent, if it was even half of that, to profit that much money is insane. To profit that much money and not put it back into the state, I just find it to be almost criminal. One other thing I wanted to mention is waterfowl. So I know we've been wanting to go, Pat. These warmer conditions this winter are kind of making it kind of rough, but the geese are definitely not here in droves like they normally would be. I think a lot of places up north are not frozen over like they typically would be. So a lot of the geese have not pushed down as much as we would obviously like. But something I noticed this morning, and I thought of you. There are ducks everywhere right now, and for those that do not know, duck is out. And talk a little bit about that, Pat. Your experience with waterfowl and just the seasons and how we're kind of out of whack here to where you can't even hunt when you should be able to.
Yeah, the migration's changed completely. I mean, you listen to the old timers I used to hunt with and grew up learning from. They would see thousands and thousands of ducks year after year, and it kind of shifted now. And then just this weather pattern, you're at the mercy of the weather. If it doesn't freeze up north of you, the ducks don't push down until it's completely froze out, and they have to get out of there. A bad storm pushes them. Right now, I'd say they're more on their northern migration with the way the weather is this year. Most of the time, you're getting your push of, common mergansers, hooded mergansers, which are, again, a fish eater. Those will go right into your lakes and eat. A common merganser can eat, 12-inch bass with no problem, or a 12-inch trout. They catch them, they flip them up, they throw them down their throat hole. So that's another thing, and you'll see thousands of them. Down here, when it gets cold, they'll be down on the creeks and the rivers. But we don't have that push, so right now, it's tough. It went out 2 weeks ago, and there's birds showing up now. I believe they could actually allot in the state later into the season. You can make some adjustments on the front end of the season. Our early waterfowl is only 2 weeks long down in the southwest PA, or the southern zone of Pennsylvania. And then it comes back in a little later, and then it will stay until January. But if you take it off on the November side, and then push that extra 2 weeks of January when the ducks do show up and you're hitting that freeze out, you can do some, damage on some waterfowl. You can actually go out and shoot a couple ducks and a couple geese and stuff like that. I'm watching the Midwest because I used to go snow goose hunting out there, and these birds never push down as far as they normally do. They'll go Louisiana, Texas, even South America if it's that cold. But right now they're starting to push north again. So just the weather pattern this year's kind of got it a little screwed up. But I really do believe that if we pushed our duck season a little bit later into January, I think you get a lot more opportunity as a waterfowl. I mean, that's a lot of work to go out there and set up decoys. And whether you're hunting a field with full bodies or silhouettes, or there's several different types of decoys you can use, it's a lot of work. You set up a goose spread, you're talking, heck, you can set up 7-8 dozen decoys, your blinds, everything like that. Most of the time you have to carry them or have a quad or something like that to drag them everywhere. It's a lot of work for just, laying out in the sun half the time.
Well, yeah, we're definitely not a flyway like the central part of the country. That goes without saying. And I definitely think, to your point, as times change and the weather patterns are even changing in some capacities, you got to reevaluate the times when you can and cannot hunt these different species. So,
well, even that goes back to the nest raiders, the raccoons, and that's why the Dakotas do what they do with their predation and the nest raiders. In Western Ohio, they extend their mink, muskrat, and raccoons all the way until March sometime, because that's the nesting area for the Lake Erie marsh zone. So that's something that they can do over in this state. Just extend that season a little bit longer. You can't trap mink and muskrat now, and I have guys telling me as I'm running my traps that they're saying mink down there at the creek. So if they're down there at the creek, they're going to eat a fish. If they can get one, they'll eat it. On top of everything else that they'll go after. I mean, they're a killing machine basically, and we can't trap them right now.
1,000%. Well, hey, I greatly appreciate you taking the time today. I'm going to wrap it up and go over some events here for the Mariana Outdoorsman Association. Anybody just looking ahead here, Friday, March 1st, we're going to have a trout stalking at 3 p.m. The 9th of March, we're having a gun bash, cash bash, and that'll be at Cookburg Fire Department. If anybody would like to see us on the 16th, we'll have a booth set up at the FOAC, F-O-A-C Gun Bash. That's up at the Washington County Fairgrounds. I jumped over it. I apologize. 16th, 17th, and 18th of February, we'll be at the the Allegheny County Sportsman Show. That's the Pittsburgh Great Outdoor Show. Happy to see everybody there. We'll also be March 2nd and 3rd, which is a Saturday, Sunday. We'll be down at Milan Park in Morgantown for that outdoor show. Lots of stuff going on over the, I would say, the next 45 days as far as shows, bashes, trout stalkings. And as always, we stalk the first Friday of every month with trout. Upland birds are weekly. And we have a continental pheasant hunt Saturday, the 24th of February. So last call for that. Hey, join the Mariana Outdoorsman Association at marianaoutdoors.com. This has been The Great Outdoors with Jason White and Pat Lasco. Thanks so much, and I'll see everybody next week.